Hi everyone. So today we will discuss about software engineering code of ethics. So the first draft of the software engineering code of ethics was developed in cooperation with the IEEE, Computer Science Society, and ACM in 1996. Following this draft was widely circulated to receive comments and suggestions for improvement. And IEEE and ACM approved the current version in 1998. Different perspective clashed as the code of ethics was being developed. One such confrontation took place in regard to how to approach ethics. So the first approach was based on the inherent virtuous nature of humans. This implies that we simply have to indicate the proper direction and people will follow it. And the proponents of this approach wanted a code that inspires good behavior with few details. The other approach, based on rights and obligations and required an outline of all the rights and obligations. The supporter of the later approach wanted a very detailed code. So basically, there were two people who were two school of thoughts or two minds of thoughts were involved in this draft or code of ethics. So one people was saying that okay, you just give a direction and people will follow that direction and will act on it according to their convenience. Other school of thought said that okay, no, we need to outline all the tiny bits of ethics and details and obligations, this code of ethics, and people will follow it. So another source of tension stemmed from conflicts in terms of what priority to give to the code's principles. For example, should we favor the employee or the public? This was resolved by indicating that public good comes before loyalty to the employer or to the profession. Some people would have preferred to list the standard to be used. It was decided not to list any or instead specify within the code that the currently acceptable standards should be used. On the other hand, everyone agreed that software engineers must be proactive when they become aware of potential problems within the system. Therefore, clauses were added to require engineers to communicate potentially dangerous situations and to allow software engineers to denounce these types of situations. So it means that software engineers should lead from the front in case of any such defect identified. To satisfy those who wanted a higher level code and those who wanted a more detailed code, two versions of the code were developed, an abridged version and a complete version. So the code, we will discuss the abridged version later on. So the code has already been adopted by many organizations. The code is a document that is part of an employee contract. The employee must sign it upon hiring. Once over the years, the code became de facto standard. In some cases, companies may decide not to do business with a company that does not adhere to this code. The code describes 8 commitments with which peers, public, and legal organizations can measure the moral behavior of a software engineer, which is in table 2.5. Each commitment has a called a principle here and is described in one sentence and supported by a certain number of clauses that include examples and detail that help in its interpretation. Software engineers and software developers who adopt the code agree to respect the 8 principles of quality and morality. Following are some examples of code of ethics. For principle 3, which is a product, declares that a software engineer will ensure that their product and any related changes meet the highest possible professional standard. The principle is supported by 15 clauses. Clause 3.10 states that software engineer will carry out tests, debugging, and reviews of software and related documents on which they are working. The code has been translated to 9 languages, which are this, and many organizations have publicly adopted the code of ethics, and a few universities have included it as a part of their software engineering study program. So these are the 8 principles of you can say software code of ethics, software engineering code of ethics. First is the public, description of the public, the client, an employer, the product, judgment, management, profession, colleagues, and self. So you can see the description of each of them, how they are described. So abridged version of the you can say code states that the main aspirations, whereas the articles in the complete version of the code provide example and more information as to the manner in which these aspirations must be reflected in the behavior of the software engineer. So the abridged version only states the aspirations, or the you can say main points, you can say, or the clauses. It does not include any detailed examples and perspectives. Together, the abridged and complete versions of the code from a consistent whole. Indeed, without the statement of aspirations, the code risks seeming boring and full of legalities, and without any detailed development included. Aspirations could seem abstract and devoid of meaning. Software engineers who are professionally involved in carrying out analysis, specification design, and maintenance and must respect the principles outlined in the Code of Ethics. In accordance with their commitment to the health, safety, and the public good, software engineers must adhere to the principles present in this. To use the code professionally, a simple usage procedure is proposed. It is important to understand that the practices are presented in a specific order, from most important to the least important. Therefore, you must examine any conflict and go through the code one article at a time to see which article relates to the situation. As soon as you identify an article in the code of ethics that represents the situation described, you should note that the article has been infringed, and then you should briefly explain why the situation violates the code. Continue in this way, going through all the articles one by one, since the situation may violate more than one article in the code. So the example of the order code of ethics of the order is Ingenious and New Quebec. So since the code of ethics of the order of Quebec and Association of Professional Engineers is quite similar to the code of ethics of the software engineer presented in this chapter, we will illustrate only one of the consequences that an engineer who does not respect this code of ethics may be subjected. The following textbooks contain an example of this. So what happened actually? The engineer Paul Roberts issued opinions that were not based on sufficient factual knowledge about software design in this report, thus violating Article 4.0 of the Code of this. Commissioner Paul Roberts temporarily removed from the Law of Society for 6 months. So this is one of the example of how this Code of Ethics can be implemented and how the penalty to the concerned person can be assigned. Another possible question is the limitation of the rights to the practice for the given period, and the obligation to undergo training, fines, and obligation to redo the professional engineering certification. So these are some of the punishments under these codes. The following form can be used for software staff in the form, organization to demonstrate their commitment to the code of ethics. So sometimes in an organization, a person must take certain situations public. The whistleblowers seriously thinks that the interest of the client or public is at stake, and denounce the situation either internally or externally. Internally, he may communicate with the ombudsman or security group, which represents the upper management, whereas externally he can contact his professional order or a journalist. When the whistleblowers denounce a situation internally, he may be subject to pressure or attack from his superiors or colleagues. He might be fired. This fear of reprisal is quite real. However, the engineer is protected. Otherwise, the practice of whistleblowing would not be encouraged. The professional tribunal ensures that the identity of the whistleblower is protected by law if he so wishes. As well, there is an article in the code that stipulates the engineer being accused does not have to communicate with the complainant should he be told his name. So these are some of the facts about whistleblowers. The people who think that there is something fishy going on in their organization, and they want to communicate it to publicly, because the public comes first, then your organization, or then your professional development. So you can either denounce the facts or their security risk to someone of the higher management internally or externally to some journalist. So this is very tough, especially in third world countries. But because here the whistleblower are not protected by law, or even they are protected, the implementation is negligible. So in Western countries, whistleblower is very, you can say, real, and they are not be protected by law, and they cannot be fired. So their names are most of the times confidential as well. So yeah, that's all for now. Thanks and bye. Love